Hello, thank you for watching. This is Game Audio Toolkit, where we'll look at approaches, ideas and implementations specific to game audio. And this time, we'll look at Hourglass, a granular tool that makes it really easy to go from this to this. In game audio, you're often asked to create textures using individual sound files or source material, and this can be a painstaking process cutting up and overlaying sound files. And that's where Hourglass comes in. It makes it really easy to create textures from individual sounds. In some ways, Hourglass reminds me of another program called painstaking, which does similar things in that it lets you take a sound file and stretch it to a very long length. But Hourglass does a lot more than that. But first, let's talk about the default view, which isn't quite like this. I've turned on main parameters, sound sources, sound viewer and transport and render. And especially transport and render is really interesting, as Hourglass can record whenever you're producing an output. Just make sure you go into options and set an output file and format. For this demonstration, I'm using a source file that was recorded in a dry riverbed, with me throwing some rocks around and moving the microphone. Obviously, all these imperfections are still in this source recording, and they'll show up in the end result as well. Now you notice that the sound file we loaded is displayed in the program twice. Once in the left top corner, where it's the full length of the file, and once in the right, the texture viewer, where strangely enough the sound file is rotated 90 degrees. This is where things get a little bit weird, but there's a reason for this, and we'll show that in a second. Because you're working with a source file and a texture view, it's important that you use this little menu here to always set the length to the length of the source file. This guarantees that on playback you don't get any stretching, although of course you can use this program to stretch your file, like painstaking does. Let's press the play button and see what happens. This is a one-to-one playback of the file. Now if I move the start and exit point on my source file, it starts to play it back with a texture length that is still assuming the full length of the source file. Using the menu, we can set it to be the same length as the newly created start and exit points, and once again, the file plays back one-to-one. Since the goal of this exercise is to create a looping rock texture, I'm going to find a slightly better selection in my source view. Now whenever I do this, of course, the texture length will not be updated, so I have to press that button again to make sure they're the same length. And this is another interesting thing that this program does, and why the sound file in the texture viewer is 90-degree rotated. You can change the pitch over time, so that the playback position, as you can see on the vertical line going upwards, is changed and manipulated over time. And this is where you can hear the granular synthesis of this program stretching and morphing the sound into really interesting textures. Of course, that's not what we're after, but it's interesting. Okay, let's start making our looping rock texture. For that, we'll set a new start and end point, something that has a lot more different rock impacts. And of course, we need to hit that button again to make sure the texture and the source file are the same length, or we'd get stretching. You really only need to use 3 parameters to get really great results: the randomization, the fragment rate, and the fragment length. The fragment rate plays multiple files on top of each other, whereas the fragment length decides how long these files are. And with the randomization, you choose random points throughout the playback. If you keep a very low randomization, you slowly go through the sound file, but going a little bit left and right of the cursor position. And with the randomization of a full unit, as I've done, you get a lot of randomization. In the texture, we can set the playback position to be basically in the center of the file all the time. That is a lot easier when you're using randomization, because it means you know what you're randomizing around. As you can see in the top view, we're now pretty much randomizing around the center of the file. And by increasing the fragment rate, You can switch Hourglass and you can see that in the texture viewer the display is now horizontal. The texture viewer now displays the selection made in the source file. In this mode, Hourglass is very similar to pole stretch in that it lets you stretch textures to almost infinite length. It's a really fun program to just try things out with. I find it very easy to create horror textures or interesting stretched mechanical noises. I'll let you listen to these experiments as we go on with this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope this was useful.